Hi class, I want to talk about dropped quotations in this video. And if you look under, again, in content in our class, information for paper 2, you will see this handout that says avoiding dropped quotations. Okay. I've given credit to the person who created this. I found this on a website for the Modesto Junior College, and I really like this handout. It seems to explain pretty clearly what dropped quotations are and how you get rid of them, or how you avoid making them in the first place. So a dropped quotation is essentially a quotation that you've pulled from a source and you just plopped it in your paper, and it's there as its own sentence, and that cannot work. Okay, so there are different ways you can revise that so it is no longer a dropped quotation. Let's look at some items on this handout. So it says a dropped quotation looks like this. There are two kinds of mindset. This is a quotation, okay, that somebody has just put into their paper after a sentence they've written. So there are two kinds of mindset, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a person's type of mindset is very important. Mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty. So that's the part, that's the quote, but it's just there all by itself in the paper. Okay, so that would have to be remedied. You have to take a quotation and you have to weave it into a sentence of your own. Okay, so here is some advice for how to weave in a quotation. So you can start with something like according to, and then have the author, and then, the information, followed by a comma, and then the information. You can start with the author plus a verb, plus a comma, Smith states, okay, Smith suggests. Number 3, start with the author plus a verb and then the word that. And if you use the word that, then you don't use a comma after the word that. And then number 4, just quote keywords and paraphrase the rest. I will tell you that that's probably one of the most professional ways of doing it. Let's take a look at some of these examples. So number 1, this is using according to plus author plus comma. According to Carol Dweck, comma, mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty. Okay, and then you have your closing quotation mark and then the parenthetical citation. Number 2, which is the author plus a verb plus a comma. Carol Dweck claims, quote, mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty. End quote. Okay. Number 3, start with author plus verb plus the word that, and no comma. Carol Dweck claims that, quote, mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty, unquote. So notice that, yes, you can use a that, but you don't use a comma after the that. And then number 4, you're just quoting special keywords. Our mindsets are important because they shape our habits of, quote, coping with difficulty, unquote. And then notice that here they've decided to use Dweck, the last name, the author's last name, and the page number in the parenthetical citation. I will tell you that whether you decide or whether you choose to use the signal phrase, the author's name in the signal phrase, or in the parenthetical citation depends on whether you have used that author before. I ask, and I think many other teachers do as well, I ask that the first time you use a source in your paper, you refer to that author as signal phrase. If you use that source again in your paper, then it's up to you whether you want to name them again in a signal phrase or just put the person's name in a parenthetical citation along with the page number if applicable. All right, so some other comments on this handout that I want to look at. Some common problems that people have, where it says pitfalls to avoid. When trying to weave a quote into your own sentence, avoid creating run-ons and comma splices. That's very important. Example of a run-on. Dweck claims mindsets are important. Mindsets lead to different ways. So they just jammed those two independent clauses or sentences together. It's very confusing. Example of a comma splice. Duet claims mindsets are important mindsets, so they just, put the comma in there when really there should be a period. But see, then if you have the period, you create a direct quotation. So again, you have to make sure that you understand, first of all, how to avoid those common sentence errors like comma splices and run-ons. But then on top of that, you have to make sure that you have some, at your disposal, you have some good methods of actually weaving quotations into your sentences. Example of a correct sentence without a run-on or a comma splice. Duet calls our attention to the importance of our mindsets when she claims mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty. This is a very well done integration of a quotation. It works really, really well using Dweck. Now, if this were the first time in your paper you were using this source, you would have to indicate the author's first name. You have to say, Carol Dweck in her book, blah, 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 calls our attention to the importance of our mindsets when she claims, and then the quotation. So then there are some specific step-by-step tips for setting up and following up quotations that he has given here. I think these are very helpful, and I do recommend that you follow this advice for weaving in quotations into your own sentences, because you definitely want to avoid drop quotations in your writing.